The flight was supposed to be routine, just another long journey in the sky, but it quickly turned into a tense and unforgettable moment. A black woman settled into her seat, quietly preparing for takeoff, when the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ma'am, you need to move," he said sharply. Confused and embarrassed, she looked around at the other passengers, who shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the awkward tension. The cabin fell silent. Most people would comply immediately, but she didn't. There was a calm, almost invisible confidence in her eyes, a quiet strength that made it clear she wasn't ordinary. She knew something they didn't, something that would turn the situation upside down. The pilot, unaware of her true position, repeated the order, his tone edged with authority, but still, she remained seated. Whispers rippled through the cabin as passengers tried to piece together what was happening. Some were shocked, others uneasy, but no one could ignore the magnetic presence she carried. What none of them realized in that moment was that she held the ultimate power in this very airplane. She wasn't just another passenger, she owned it. Every rule, every command, every instruction would ultimately be hers to enforce or ignore. As the plane taxied toward the runway, the tension inside the cabin grew unbearable. The pilot's pride was on the line, but so was the truth waiting to be revealed. What would happen when the full story came out? How would everyone react when they discovered that the woman they thought had to obey them was actually the one in charge? The answer would shock everyone on board. The woman's calm demeanor wasn't just a front, it came from years of experience navigating high-stakes situations that most people couldn't even imagine. Born into a family that had built an aviation empire from the ground up, she had grown up around aircraft, learning every detail of how they operated, from engines to regulations. But despite her wealth and influence, she preferred to move through the world quietly, letting others underestimate her until the right moment. As the plane hummed along the tarmac, her mind was already running through the events that had led her here. She had booked this flight under her legal name, unassuming and discreet, expecting a normal journey. She hadn't anticipated the pilot's assumptions, or his surprise at seeing a black woman sitting confidently in a seat he thought should be off. Every micro-expression, every whisper from passengers, only reinforced how powerful perception could be and how wrong it could go. The pilot glanced at her again, confusion and irritation flickering across his face. He didn't know her background, didn't know that she had the final say on every safety procedure, every protocol, and even the flight plan. Around them, passengers tried not to stare, but curiosity filled the cabin. Some pulled out phones, others exchanged quiet murmurs, and a few nervously laughed to mask their discomfort. Every second stretched longer as the plane prepared for takeoff. The tension thickening, no one realized how high the stakes really were, how much the pilot's next words could change the mood of the entire flight. The story of authority, perception, and hidden power was just beginning to unfold. The pilot swallowed hard, trying to regain control of a situation that was quickly slipping from his grasp. He had flown thousands of flights and never encountered a passenger who refused an order so calmly. Every instruction, he barked over the intercom now, sounded sharper, more commanding, but she only looked at him with a steady, unshakable gaze. To him, it felt like a challenge he couldn't quite read, and that uncertainty gnawed at his confidence. Meanwhile, the passengers' attention had fully shifted to the woman. Some were impressed, quietly admiring her poise. Others were confused, whispering among themselves, questioning why the pilot hadn't forced her to comply. Among them, a young mother clutched her child tightly, sensing tension in the air but unsure of what it meant. An older businessman in first class furrowed his brow, curious but cautious, wondering if this was some private dispute he had accidentally witnessed. Behind the scenes, the woman's mind ran through a dozen scenarios. She knew revealing her identity too soon could escalate the situation, but staying silent allowed her to observe the pilot, the crew, and the passengers. She noticed his frustration growing, the subtle way he tapped his foot and adjusted the controls. Each movement told her something about his character, about how he handled pressure. Then there was the subtle undercurrent among the crew. The flight attendants exchanged glances, sensing the invisible tension but unsure whose side to take. They had rules to follow, yet instinct told them there was more to this passenger than met the eye. The air was thick with anticipation, every heartbeat echoing the unspoken question: who truly held the authority on this flight? And what would happen if the truth came out? The plane's engines roared louder, signaling that takeoff was imminent. Every second that passed felt heavier, as if the cabin itself was holding its breath, waiting for the moment when hidden power and mistaken assumptions would finally collide. The plane rumbled down the runway, each vibration amplifying the tension in the cabin. The pilot's hands tightened on the controls, jaw clenched, as he fought to maintain the authority he thought he had. Every glance toward the woman made him uneasy. Her calm, measured presence seemed to mock his frustration without a word. Passengers shifted in their seats, some gripping armrests, others staring out the windows. Sensing the storm brewing in the air, whispers grew louder, though no one dared speak directly to the pilot. A flight attendant discreetly tried to calm the murmurs, but even her practiced composure faltered under the electric tension. The woman didn't flinch. As eyes followed her every movement, she simply adjusted her seat, crossed her legs, and leaned back slightly. radiating a quiet confidence that unsettled everyone, especially the man at the controls. In that moment, the history behind her presence weighed heavily in the air. She had fought for decades to prove herself in a world that constantly underestimated her. And this wasn't just another flight, it was a stage where perception clashed with reality. The pilot, unaware of her legacy and authority, kept tightening the screws of confrontation, his voice sharper with each intercom command. Passengers sensed the invisible battle, the clash of authority and perception, the struggle between ego and truth. The engines roared louder, signaling takeoff just moments away. Hearts pounded, breaths quickened, and every eye in the cabin was fixed on the silent standoff. The tension was unbearable, the anticipation almost tangible. Something was about to happen, something that would shatter assumptions, challenge every expectation, and leave everyone on the plane questioning who truly held power. And then, just as the plane lifted its nose, the first move that would change everything began, but no one could predict the impact it would have. Just as the plane lifted off the runway, a sudden alert flashed on the cockpit screens. The pilot's eyes widened. An unexpected technical issue had appeared, something that could force an immediate emergency landing if not handled correctly. Panic threatened to rise, but the woman remained calm, almost unnervingly so. Her hands rested lightly on her lap, but her mind was racing through protocols, contingency plans, and the silent power she held in this moment. Passengers murmured nervously, noticing the shift in energy. A few glanced at the pilot, hoping for reassurance, while others instinctively looked at the woman, as if sensing she might hold the answers they didn't know they needed. The cabin felt smaller somehow, the hum of the engines mixing with the rapid heartbeat of suspense. The pilot's pride and authority were now not only challenged by her presence, but by the sudden threat that demanded real skill and composure. Then another twist hit. The co-pilot whispered something urgent in the pilot's ear, eyes darting nervously toward the woman. It became clear that the technical problem wasn't minor. If handled poorly, it could escalate in seconds. Yet instead of showing fear, she quietly reached into her bag, producing a tablet filled with complex flight data. The crew froze, unsure whether to react. Realizing that she was not just a passenger, she had access to the exact information they needed to manage the crisis. Every second stretched unbearably. The stakes had suddenly doubled. Authority, competence, and perception collided in a way that no one on the plane could have anticipated. The pilot's frustration mixed with rising panic, while the passengers sat on the edge of their seats, waiting for the moment when the true balance of power and the consequences of a single choice would be revealed. The cabin went silent as the woman tapped into the tablet, her fingers moving confidently over the screen. The pilot's jaw tightened, torn between pride and desperation, as she calmly spoke through the intercom. Her voice was steady, authoritative, yet warm. "There's a way to stabilize the engine pressure. Follow my instructions precisely." The crew exchanged shocked glances, realizing that the passenger they had underestimated held the solution to the emergency. The pilot hesitated for only a moment before nodding, swallowing his pride, and following her guidance. Passengers watched in stunned silence as she coordinated every step, from adjusting engine output to recalibrating the autopilot. Every action was precise, every decision calculated. The plane steadied, the alarms faded, and a collective sigh of relief swept through the cabin. When the turbulence finally ended and the aircraft leveled off, the pilot too